Have you ever done everything you thought you were supposed to do for God? Prayed, read the Bible, showed up at church, tried your best, and still felt a quiet distance inside your soul? What if the reason you feel far from God isn't because you've lost your faith, but because something deeper has slowly replaced your connection? Many people are spiritually busy, but emotionally empty. They keep moving, serving, and doing things for God while missing the simple truth that God desires their heart, not just their actions. Stay until the end, because the answer may not be about trying harder. It may be about coming closer in a completely different way. You can do everything right and still feel like God is a stranger. You can pray, you can read your Bible, you can go to church every single Sunday and still feel completely far from Him. It's that hollow ache in your chest when the music stops. The kind of spiritual distance nobody really talks about. You're checking all the boxes, but your soul still feels empty. It's like sitting at a table full of food while your stomach is growling, and the scary part? Most people don't even realize it's happening. They think they're fine because they're busy. They mistake activity for intimacy. They believe that because they are busy for God, they are actually with God. But sometimes busyness is just noise, keeping us distracted from the distance we actually feel. You aren't losing your faith, but maybe you've lost connection. You're stuck on a spiritual treadmill, exhausted, but never truly moving closer. And for many believers, that distance doesn't happen all at once. It grows quietly, even while everything still looks spiritual on the outside. And if that distance goes unnoticed for too long, relationship slowly turns into performance, and eventually you can end up standing before God while hiding the real version of yourself from Him. Maybe that's where you are right now. You try to pray, but it feels like you're just rehearsing lines to an empty room. You read the Bible, but the words stay on the page. Nothing sticks, nothing breathes, and nothing changes. You want to be close to God. You truly do. But there is a wall you can't see and a distance you can't bridge. Something just feels off. But here is the truth that might sting. The reason for the distance isn't your lack of discipline. It's your lack of vulnerability. You've been so busy trying to be a good Christian that you forgot how to be an honest human. You've been coming to God wearing a mask of perfection when all God ever wanted was the mess you're trying to hide. You're ghosting God by showing Him the version of you that doesn't exist and wondering why you can't feel Him in the life you actually live. And here's the truth most people miss. Souls rarely collapse overnight. They fade slowly, one distracted day at a time. It happens when your relationship with God slowly turns into a routine instead of a connection. It happens when your faith becomes something you manage instead of someone you walk with. You're still in the boat, you're still in the church, but the current of life is slowly pulling you out to sea. The Bible actually warns us about this exact feeling in Hebrews 2:1. It says, "We must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away." It doesn't say, don't walk away or don't rebel. It says drift. You aren't far from God because you did something evil. You're far from God because you became distracted. You mistook the safety of the harbor for the movement of the Spirit. Think of your faith like being in a boat on a moving river. You aren't paddling away. You haven't picked up the oars and decided to leave the shore. You haven't quit on God, but you have stopped rowing. You've rested your oars because you're tired or because you think the boat is stable enough on its own. And slowly, so slowly, you don't even feel the motion. The current of life begins to take over. Without a single splash, that quiet current of bills, stress, and routine carries you further and further away from the shore. By the time you look up to pray, the shore you used to know is just a thin line on the horizon. You didn't jump overboard. You just fell asleep at the oars. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. You never accidentally grow closer to God. The noise of life pulls at you constantly. Distractions pull at you. Comfort pulls at you. The world trains your attention to move everywhere except toward Him. You drift toward the version of yourself that doesn't need him, toward the pressure, toward the endless need to stay busy. But intimacy with God only grows where attention is protected. That's why closeness with God doesn't happen by chance. It happens when you choose him on purpose, again and again and again. Because intimacy isn't something you stumble into. It's something you protect from everything trying to steal it. You can't pray away a drift you're still feeding, and you can't return to intimacy while hiding behind a version of yourself that isn't real. So, if you're tired of the distance, tired of performing, tired of feeling spiritually numb while pretending everything is fine, there are 4 shifts you need to make. Not religious performances, not empty rituals, but real changes that silence the noise and lead you back to the Father's heart. And shift number 1 is the hardest, because it requires the one thing most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You don't need a miracle to find him again. You just need a direction. Because drawing near to God was never about escaping your life. It was about inviting him into it. You don't have to climb a mountain to hear him. You can meet him in the silence before you answer that text. In the moment, your spirit says, "This conversation doesn't match who you're becoming." In the meeting, in the classroom, in the car ride home, in the quiet seconds before you make a decision. God is not waiting for you at some distant destination. He is already there. In every moment, you finally become aware of him again. And this is where so many people get stuck. They hear, "draw near to God," and immediately think, "I need to fix myself first." So they hide. They wait until they feel spiritual enough, clean enough, certain enough. They think they have to repair the boat before they can return to the shore. But while they're waiting to become worthy, the current keeps pulling them farther away. And the heartbreaking part is this: God was never asking for perfection. He was asking for honesty. You keep trying to approach God through performance, while God is waiting for the real you to finally show up. God was never asking for perfection. He was asking for honesty. And that leads to shift number 2. Shift number 2. You have to move from condemnation to conviction. Here is the irony. The moment you start rowing back toward the shore, you're going to notice your flaws more than ever. The closer you get to the light, the more the shadows in your life are revealed. And this is where most people quit. They hear the voices whispering, "You're not good enough to be here. You failed too many times to count. You're just going to drift again. Why even try?" Listen to me. That is not God. That is the noise of the current trying to pull you back out to sea. You have to learn the difference between the weight that sinks you and the hand that pulls you up. Condemnation says, "Look at what you did. You are garbage. It's a dead end. It makes you want to hide." But conviction says, "Look at what you're doing. You are better than this." Condemnation points at your past to keep you stuck. Conviction says, "This is not who God is calling you to become. This is not who you were created to be. Come closer. There's more for you than this." And finally, you don't have to stay this version of yourself. Condemnation chains you to your past, but conviction calls you into transformation. God is not exposing your wounds to humiliate you. He's exposing them because he wants to heal what you've been hiding. But even when you understand the difference between condemnation and conviction, there can still be something blocking intimacy. You can have the right Bible, the right prayers, even the right intentions, and still feel like there's a wall between you and God because you're trying to connect with a creator who loves the real you while presenting him with the polished version of you. You're standing before God while hiding the very parts of you he wants to heal. You've been coming to the throne with rehearsed words while God has been waiting for honesty. And if you want to break that wall, you have to make the most uncomfortable shift of all. Shift number 3. Shift number 3. You have to move from performance to vulnerability. Most people never grow, not because they aren't trying, but because they are hiding. They spend their prayer time making excuses, minimizing their mess, and pretending everything is blessed when their heart is actually breaking. You've been coming to God with a script. You've been showing him Instagram version of your faith, filtered, cropped, and perfect. But you cannot have a real connection with a fake version of yourself. Real closeness doesn't start with, "Dear God, thank you for this day." Real closeness starts when you finally say, "God, this is where I actually am. I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm doubting, and I am lost." No filters, no performance, no rehearsed spirituality, because here is the spiritual law. What you hide, God cannot heal. God isn't looking for your goodness before he comes close. He's looking for your honesty. He can't fill a heart that is already full of secrets. God cannot heal the parts of you you keep pretending don't exist. He only fills the hearts that are open enough to be empty. Here's the truth you need to know. You can feel convicted for a night, honest for a moment, inspired for a weekend, but if nothing around you changes, eventually the drift returns. And that's why so many people live on a spiritual treadmill, always restarting, never transforming. Without this final shift, today's breakthrough becomes tomorrow's memory. Because if you want to stop drifting for good, you have to stop feeding the current that keeps pulling you away. And that leads to the final shift. Shift number 4. And this is where everything changes, because the Christian life was never meant to be sustained by exhaustion. So many people spend their entire lives trying harder, praying harder, forcing harder, thinking that if they just push enough, they'll finally feel close to God again. But the harder they try, the more exhausted they become. Why? Because intimacy with God was never built on human effort. You have to move from trying harder to trusting deeper. You don't earn closeness with God. You respond to his love. You've been treating your relationship with God like a contract. If I perform well enough, maybe he'll stay close. But God was never offering a contract. He was offering a covenant. The goal was never, "Let me fix myself so God can finally accept me." The truth is, God met you in your mess first, and his love is what gives you the strength to come closer. That's the difference. Trying harder depends on your strength, and that's why you're exhausted. But trusting deeper depends on his grace, and that's where rest finally begins. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. If closeness with God could be earned, you would have collapsed under the weight of trying already. But grace was never something you achieve. It's something you surrender to. The practical step. You don't need to climb a mountain to find him. You just need to stop running. So I want you to start here. Not next week, not when you're better. Tomorrow morning, before you let the noise of the world tell you who you are. Just sit on the edge of your bed and say, "God, I'm here. I don't want to do today without you." That's it. It feels small, but it's the most revolutionary thing you can do. Because in that one sentence, you aren't performing, you aren't hiding, you're simply drawing near. And the more you practice that, the more you stop treating God like a place you visit and start treating him like a presence you walk with. That's the real shift. Not just praying to God sometimes, but living with God daily. When something good happens, talk to him about it. When anxiety hits, bring him into it. Before you walk into that relationship, that party, that conversation, that decision, pause and ask, "God, can you walk with me through this? Does this place match the peace you're building in me? Will this move pull me closer to you or farther from you?" Because the goal is no longer just how much of God can I fit into my life. The goal becomes, how much of my life am I willing to let God into? That's how the drift stops. Not through one emotional moment, but through daily awareness, little conversations, quiet convictions, small acts of surrender, until eventually God is no longer someone you only meet during spiritual moments. He becomes the person you walk with through all of life. And choosing to lay your real, messy self at the feet of a holy God, it means choosing consistency over convenience and truth over the trend. There comes a point in your life where you stop asking, "God, where are you?" and you start declaring, "God is here." Not because you feel it, but because you've decided to believe it. I don't wait for a feeling. I don't wait for a sign. I know God is real. I know he is near. I know he hears me. Even when I feel nothing, I will still draw near because I don't drift toward God. I choose Him again and again and again. When I fall, I come back. When I fail, I don't hide. When I feel nothing, I stay because my faith is not built on my fluctuating feelings. It is built on His unchanging grace, and I believe this with everything I am. Share this video with someone you know who's been struggling with that quiet spiritual distance lately. Let them know they aren't losing their faith. They just need to drop the oars and come home. If you want more honest, life-changing biblical truth about what it really looks like to walk closely with God in everyday life, hit that subscribe button and join us here at Bible Resolve. Stop performing, start connecting. I'll see you in the next video.